Welcome to Freya's Fairy Tales, where we believe fairy tales are both stories we enjoyed as children and something that we can achieve ourselves. Each week, we will talk to authors about their favorite fairy tales when they were kids, and their adventure to holding their very own fairy tale in their hands. At the end of each episode, we will finish off with a fairy tale or short story read as close to the original author's version as possible. I am your host, Freya Victoria. I'm an audiobook narrator that loves reading fairy tales, novels, and bringing stories to life through narration. I am also fascinated by talking to authors and learning about their why and how for creating their stories. We've included all of the links for today's author and our show in the show notes. Be sure to check out our website and sign up for our newsletter for the latest on the podcast. Today is part 1 of 2, where we are talking to M.L. Burns about her novels. Over the next 2 weeks, you'll hear about starting with text-based role-playing and moving into novels, overcoming writing challenges and imposter syndrome, listening to what your readers want, within reason, getting your book ready for release, working with author friends to cross-promote books, writing non-standard POVs, and the best advice she's received that you cannot edit a blank page. The Hourglass Keeper. Time has never been on Azahara's side. Exhausted from her relentless pursuit to break from the clutches of an obsessive god's curse, she has all but given up hope of freedom. Until Cade, a half-blood elf, saves her from certain death. They find themselves bound together by a force they could never have anticipated. As their journey unfolds, the upcoming conflict will test this newfound connection to prove it to be her salvation or her downfall. Amidst their growing bond, the realm teeters on the edge of destruction, due to the volatile shift of magic. While Cade is bound by duty to the king and his kingdom, Azahara struggles to maintain a delicate balance with the sands of time. Can she safeguard the lives she holds dear, or will the relentless tilting of the hourglass force her back to the beginning, resetting the cycle she has endured for the past 5 centuries? The podcast is Freya's Fairy Tales, and that is fairy tales in 2 ways. Fairy tales are something that we either watched, or we read, or we had read to us when we were kids. Also, the journey for you to spend weeks, months, or years working on your novel to hold that in your hands is a fairy tale for you. It feels like a fairy tale to you. So I like to start off with, what was your favorite fairy tale when you were a kid, and did that favorite change as you got older?
Oh gosh. I think my favorite fairy tale, and it's a Disney movie, it would be Mulan.
Okay.
But before that, it was Princess Mononoke, and I don't know if you or a lot of people will know what that is. Do you know what Princess Mononoke is?
I've heard it. I don't think I've done the story on here. And I
Okay,
don't know that I know a lot about it. I think I've just heard the name.
okay. So I bring up Mulan too because I feel like it's the same concept as like a very strong, independent female main character, but like there's some romance in there, and that's okay because I feel like nowadays people are so against like, oh well, now she wants a man, like that doesn't make her
Yeah.
independent. And I really
Right.
enjoyed kind of growing up with, no, we can have strong independent women and still have them love and like
Right.
that be their story. So I would say like my favorite fairy tale is definitely Mulan or Princess Mononoke for those that know who that is, what that is.
All right.
So
And is it still the same?
yeah, I would say so. Yeah. I have a 3-year-old and her favorite is Goldilocks right now. So I
Okay.
don't know if that will change at this point. I read it every night. So
I
may end up
think
being.
my daughter's gone through like a wide range of all the it's like for 6 weeks it's this one, and then it changes for the next 6 weeks. And
I needed to change.
you're just like, could I please stop reading this story?
I'm at that point. I'm like, please, can I get something else? And now she's like watching A Nightmare Before Christmas, which I love that movie. Don't get me wrong, but
Mhm.
it's every day. It's every
Yeah.
day. Twice a day.
See,
Please.
I think the best investment we ever made was a Kindle Fire tablet with headphones. And it's
You
the
got
kid
one.
version. It's the kid version, so it's like
Yep.
all locked down where she can't do, and she gets so mad that she can't do anything extra. But
Oh,
she'll be like,
no.
my daughter's 9, so she's like, I just want to
Okay.
I want to find a dragon game, and there's no good dragon games. And I'm like, so occasionally I'll search through on the adult side of it and add some kid dragon games over there, but
Love it. Love
that
it.
is, if anyone, if you need something to entertain your kid, I'm like, our philosophy has always been, as long as you're getting your chores done and your school done, we don't limit
Yep.
screen time at all. Um, I mean, she has like limits to what she's allowed to do. Like there's certain
Of
games she can't
course.
play and
Yeah,
certain movies she's restricted to like the kid side of Netflix and the kid side of YouTube and stuff like that. But
absolutely.
um she's smart enough. She knows how to get to the other side, but she does listen.
That was my 3-year-old. I swear. She does have a tablet. We have the same philosophy. We don't really do screen time. She is so smart. Like, and I that we were so fearful of like her having too much screen time and that would affect her growth, but it never did, and or
Mhm.
hasn't so far. But she has her own iPad, thanks, because she took it from my iPad, became her iPad. And I was like, okay, well, I didn't need that anyways. Thanks. So I'm right there with you. She's too smart.
So, at what age did you start writing? Anything, short stories, whatever.
I started writing, I think at about 12. And for context, I'm 33. So I started writing at 12, doing text-based role playing. And I don't know if you are familiar with what that is. No,
Could
I'm gonna take
yeah. No.
I mean, it's pretty like I guess if you like think about what it's exactly what it sounds like. So it could be anywhere between two to I mean, I've been in forms where there've been 10 people, but basically you build a story around your character, but
Mhm.
writing like a book with somebody else. And it was
Okay.
always like in forums or like forums was the main place I would do it. But and then when I turned 15, I was like, I'm gonna write a book. I'm gonna do it. And 18 years later, oh, it took a long time, but uh yeah. So
You did eventually get there.
yeah, I did eventually. I got to the point, but no, I bet I've been writing kind of on and off between that then and now. Um, but yeah,
So, did you work on the same book for 18 years, or did you start
no,
many books over 18 years?
no. As I wouldn't admit that, but no, I didn't. It was not the same book. um, I would have just passed that question on to the next. No, I'm just kidding. But I I had so many ideas, and I would write them down, or like I would tell my husband, or I'd just be ready to go and do it, and I'd start like one page, and I'm like, you know what? I think I'm gonna go. I think I'm gonna go play video games, or I'm gonna go have a drink, or I'm gonna go out with my
Mhm.
friends. Um, but no, so not the same story. This one, I started. Actually, I don't know if that's gonna be another question, so maybe I
You
should stop there.
you can just keep going.
Okay. I was like, I don't want to take the question away from later, but
I
I
generally
started.
start with, it's kind of, I like to let it kind of flow more naturally if it needs to.
Okay.
So I start with fairy tales, go into when you started writing, and then wherever it goes from there,
Wherever then it
that's where it
goes.
goes.
Perfect. Perfect. I talk way too much about this book. My husband will tell you. He's tired of it. He's like, "You're going to talk to somebody else about it? Perfect. Have fun. Go right ahead. Go right ahead." So I moved to Spain from the US in January, and I don't know what it was about being here. It just gave me that kind of like that confidence to just go ahead and write it. And I had
Mhm.
people that were like, just put it on paper. Just put it on paper. It sounds like a great idea. And so I started writing the book in March of this year,
Mhm.
and I finished the first draft in July. And since
Okay.
then I've been editing
Tweaking.
it because I've been I have terrible imposter syndrome and I'm so anxious and I'm like, something's wrong. I know there's something wrong. That comma, God, oh my God, all my author friends, I know they're gonna say, yep, it's that damn comma. My God.
I took
So
more of the approach of I'm gonna get it. I don't know. I have such like a it's not imposter syndrome, it's kind of like the opposite where it's like, well, it was good the first time. But, like,
I
it's
need that.
not. It's not. I mean, like, I know that I need to go back and revise it, but then, like, there's only so many times I can look at it before I'm like, I can't tell what's wrong anymore. Like, I know there's
I
things
know.
wrong, but I need someone to tell me what's wrong now.
I'm at that point. I was at that point. I'm like, I've read this book like 50 times. I'm like, ask me what chapter. Just ask me a random chapter. I can read you the whole thing in my head. I could tell you the whole damn thing in my head.
Well, and
Out loud.
then
Out loud.
I spent so long on book 1 and getting like I focused on book 1 until book 1 was like done and edited and out with ARC readers, and then I'm like, now it's time for book 1.5 because it's a novella.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like,
Uh-huh.
I can't even remember what I wrote the day before. I'm like, did I already write that into the did I already write that into it? Let's go back the 2 chapters I've already written
I
and
gotta go
figure it
back.
out.
Oh my God. That terrified me. That did. I was really afraid once I finished book one that I wouldn't be able to get back into book two or go to book two to three. So I actually ended up just immediately going and writing book two
Mhm.
as my like alpha readers read book one. And then I and they're like, okay, now I need book two. And I'm like, okay, well, here you go. And then I just moved into book three. So I have books one, two, and three, and now I'm working on 3.5 because I ended up adding a novella as well, which I don't know why I did that to myself, but here we are. Here we are. Um, but then I moved back to editing book one because obviously I was getting my alpha readers and my beta readers were like, yeah, this is good. You just come on, edit it and get it out there. So
Right.
that's where we're at.
So it went to alpha readers, it went to beta
Mhm,
readers. I imagine there was editing in between there of their feedback. And then did you
mhm.
send it to an editor before it went out anywhere else? Or what did you do after beta reader edits?
Yeah, so I did a lot of research on doing self edits, so like Grammarly, and I did a lot of um, reading out loud to my
Mhm.
husband, and I'm like, okay, well that doesn't make any sense. I need to fix that.
Right.
Or or like Word has a like a read out loud option, which has been
Mhm.
if nobody knows about that, it's fantastic. Um, so after I felt pretty confident that I had caught the majority of things, I did end up sending it to an editor.
Mhm.
Um, for line edits, I think is what it was. Um, lessons learned, that you get what you pay for. And when it came back, I found things and I'm like, wait, if I can see this, then so I ended up redoing some edits myself. And since then I have not sent it to another editor. So
Okay.
um I will have a proofread before it officially launches. But
Mhm.
other than that, I'm doing this self-publishing, so every dollar comes out of
You.
my very empty wallet already.
Right. Yeah, me, my editor sorry, my editor does everything but developmental editing. So, she's like, if there's some, like, big thing and there was a couple things she was like, "For a typical fantasy story, you have too much family together time with, like, her and her family as opposed to just
Got
her
it.
with the romantic
Mhm.
interest." And I'm like, "Yeah, but, my beta readers asked me to add more scenes in, so I did." So I'm not gonna take
Right.
them back out. So she was like, "Hey, if the readers want it, leave it." So
Yes, I found that so crazy that people and I say people, I should say like publishing agencies and like the recommendation of like your first book being like 130,000 words, I think was or like 100 130,000 for your very first book. But my first draft ended up being like 192,000. I brought it down to 150. I think at this final stage, it's about 153. And when my alpha readers and beta readers finished it, they were like, you should add this and this. I'm like, is there any piece that you think I should take out? Like, don't make me add. They're like, no, no, I think you should add here. I'm like, son of a okay, yeah, sure. So I find that so it's encouraging because like I do feel like readers want more.
Mhm.
Obviously not fluff, right? We don't want to add the
Right.
fluff because then that's when
Right.
it's boring and draws out. But I just the whole it needs to be within this amount of words. Just it just strikes a weird chord for me.
Yeah, I googled, so mine's fantasy romance. It's not an epic, it's just a normal fantasy romance.
Same.
So I
Yep.
googled like what are the, and this was only, I googled what are the standards only so that I could set my goal in Scrivener so it could tell me what my like per day word counts needed to be. And I actually ended up setting it on the higher end because when I had googled it, it was like, oh, it needs to be between like 80 and 120,000, I want to say. So I set it on the
Sounds right.
higher end thinking, oh, well, if it comes in under that, that's okay. And if it comes in over that, that's okay too. But it was just a good, like,
Right.
place to set
Mhm.
the set the goalpost. Like,
Gives you
I
that
need to
stamp.
put something here. So now I'm working on the first novella, and I'm like, okay, so novellas are supposed to be between 10 and 40,000. So I'm like, we're gonna set
What?
it at
Oh, sh
40,000, and if it ends up at if it
oh,
ends up a
no.
novel size, that's fine too. Your novella's
Oh,
not a
no.
novella?
Oh, it's not gonna be enough. I'm in chapter 3 and it's already at, like, 15,000 words. Oh,
Oh
no.
god.
Oh, no. Oh, no. What have I done?
Yeah, so but there's, like, a weird gap. So it was, like, when I was, like, what are standard and this is all based off TradPub, obviously. So when I was, like,
Mhm.
Googling what are standard, it was like, oh, novellas, like, 10 to 40,000, and then, like, a novel would start at, like, 50,000. So there's, like, a gap of, like, 10,000 words. But I'm kind of like, I'm gonna write the story I want to, so my novellas
Yep.
are like in the novel, in the first book, there's like a war happening. And so the
Mhm.
novella is from the other, side of the war, the other people they're
Oh.
battling's perspective. Why were they doing this? Why did
That's
they do
cool.
that? Blah, 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 blah. So I'm like, it should be shorter. And I'm 3 chapters in and I'm only like 2,500 words in. So I'm like, this is moving at a much, much faster pace because you already know half the stuff that happened because it already happened.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, yeah. Mine is like a fluffy, obviously it's like 3.5. It's book 3.5, so I won't spoil anything, but it takes perspective outside of the main character Azahara,
Okay.
and it happens between book 3 and 4. It's like a fluffy story, but it gives much more background on the characters around her.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so yeah, I won't say more because obviously that's in the way future. I don't think the novella will come out until like 2025, but so,
Yes, as far as
so
I know about editors, like everything from the many authors I've talked to in the last year and a half I've been doing this podcast, the general consensus seems to be like get recommendations from other authors as opposed to like, Googling or Fiverr or whatever. Um I didn't take that advice. I I also narrate audiobooks, and so I one of the authors that I narrate for who had a very clean manuscript, which she did not edit herself, but she also edits books on the side. And
mm,
so I had her do a sample edit. She did a really good job with the sample edit. Um, and then I found out that she actually is an editor for like a ghostwriting house too. So I'm like, okay, I accidentally stumbled into someone who actually knows what they're doing. So
oh, that's awesome.
yeah. And the bonus, I was messaging her because I came across a video of some lady claiming, I mean, really, reality is editors are freelance, so they can charge whatever they want to
Totally.
charge. But there was a lady like, oh, I'm, getting started. I'm only going to charge $300, but standard rates are 3 cents. So when you're looking at, I don't remember what the manuscript size was, but it was like $2,700 and she's only charging 300. And I'm like, my book was like 92,000 words and I only spent like $400. So I don't know where these 3 cent people are, but
Nice.
I like messaged my editor and was like, "Are you like severely undercharging?" I mean, for all I know, I got like a good relationship discount or something. I don't
No,
know.
that's really good because the standard is I think 3 cents or like 2 cents, and I mean, my book being as big as it was originally, I think my
Mhm.
first edited down was about 170,000, and I was like, okay, I gotta find a way to bring this down, but it was going to cost me like $4,000 or $5,000 just to get the first
Yeah.
edit, and I'm like, "I can't afford that." Who
Well, I can
can?
let you know because of that video, I went to a couple of, like, people that I know were, like, very well-known editors on TikTok, and it is a gigantic range of what they charge. The, like, more well-known ones, there was one that was up in the 3 cent range, but then there was, I don't know if you've seen the lady that has the split dye and she does the hilarious, like, romance editing things where she'll, like,
I don't
pretend
think
like
so.
she's oh my god, I can't remember what her name is. It's like the spicy editor or something like that, and she does these hilarious skits, but her rates are like 0.007 cents a word. And she's, like, booked out several months, fully booked out, pretty decently well known on TikTok for editing, and I'm like, "Well, if she's charging that,
Yeah.
that means that that must be somewhere in the right range of what people should be charging." But again, it's freelance, and if you can get 3 cents for it and people will pay you for it, go for it.
Go for apparently they do pay for it, so not me,
Yeah, no,
obviously.
no, and I told my editor, I was like, "If it ever" I'm like, "I'm sorry, and, like, you charge what you think you're worth, but if it was ever gonna cost me $2,700, I would just edit it myself because I can't
Yeah.
at this stage, I could not."
Yeah, exactly. That yeah, and that I do hope that my book will provide some funding to fund the second book. That's all my hope
Right,
is, right? Because that's
right.
that's at this point, that's what I want. I just wanna be able to, get my book cover, get it edited, and not I don't wanna do it by myself anymore. I don't wanna that's too much.
See, I made my own book covers. I've
Mm.
done the only thing that I have hired out for, I hired someone to help me build an ARC team and to do some promotion stuff around launch,
Oh.
and then I hired my editor. Everything else I've done myself. I bought vellum to do the formatting. I had Canva Pro already for podcast related stuff. So I
Sure,
just,
yeah.
use what you already got. No need to pay for it again. So
Exact
I made all my
exactly.
covers in Canva. It worked just fine. They are beautiful. So I've seen some that are not
Yes.
though. So if like you can't I spent a
Yeah.
I spent a really long time looking at fantasy series in particular, but looking at fantasy series, looking at trying to figure out what the commonalities were that made them look like a cohesive series, and specifically in TradPub, because I feel like they would have done a meta. Not that indies and self-pub are bad at it, but I knew that TradPub books that are in series, they have a certain quality that you're like, oh, those all are from the same series because the font's the same, or the color scheme's the same, or the symbol on the front is somewhat the
Mm.
same or whatever it is.
Yep.
So I did that. And then I tried to like kind of model mine after that, where it's like the fonts are all the same. I just change out the word for the next book. And then um, there's some like really pretty picture in the background. So
Hey, absolutely. I tried to make mine in Canva and I use Photoshop too. But I gave the idea to somebody and then they put my
mm.
cover together, which I think is much better because I am a perfectionist and I would have never been done with the damn cover. I wouldn't even have written the next book. I'd still be putting the cover together right now.
Yeah,
So,
I am a little bit of a perfectionist, but I'm also like, I don't have time to do this. So it's like, it
yeah.
looks good. Order a proof. See how it looks. That looks really weird. Why are all the words in the middle of the, the screen or
Oh
the
my god,
cover?
yes.
So I'm like, all right, make them bigger and easier to read. Because I was scared with the templates that you use for like KDP, the template that you download, it tells you like we're going to cut this part off, but I was scared like what if they cut off a little bit extra? So I made the words smaller so that they wouldn't get cut off, and then it was like, okay, blow them up as big as you can now.
Yeah, I had to get I have 3 proofs and all of them girl, oh my god. I was like, "Can we just not?" And then they all came from 3 different distribution sites, and I'm like, "Can I just specifically have one site do it because they did it great?" But
Yeah.
no, of course
Yeah.
not. So, the struggle is very real with those, so I feel that on a lot of levels.
Now, my husband, who's also writing, his cover that he has in mind is way more complex than Canva will be able to handle, so he will have to pay for his cover. So, which I told him, I'm like, you're probably gonna have a more expensive person. So he has a second job to help save up for his his covers. So we split the cost of like Vellum and Pro Writing Aid. We split the cost
Yeah.
between us because we're both using it. But like I can narrate my own audiobook because I'm a narrator. He has a bunch of
Yeah, that's
accents in
awesome.
his book that I don't know how to do, and he wants the accents. So I'm like, yeah, you're gonna have to pay for that.
Yeah, and they're expensive. They are
Like,
audio oh,
especially when you
I,
get into like I narrate a lot of royalty share for authors, but like his with how many accents he has, I'm like you will have a hard time finding a royalty share narrator willing to take a chance
yeah.
on someone who's brand new with all those accents included, and it needs to be a duet or dual
Oh, yeah.
narration. So I'm like,
Ugh.
that's a unicorn to find a royalty shared couple that can do
Good
all the
luck.
accents. So I'm like, no, you're gonna have to pay. It's gonna cost you about this much.
Yeah. Yeah, no. I don't I can't. Oh, God. My poor wallet, the flies are coming out of it. They're like, "Don't try."
So you got your book ready, you sent it to the editor, you re-edited the editor's work. Now you said that they were telling you to get your book out there. Has your book actually been published now?
No, so it's currently in ARC's hands right
Okay.
now. I have a tentative date for it, which I can share because it's not like a secret. Because technically, for me to put my book on Goodreads, I had to have it somewhere, and I
Right.
don't have a website
Yeah,
yet.
I found that out the hard way.
Um, yeah, so it's currently a November 30th
Okay.
release. As long as I can get my final proof done and it looks good, um, then it'll be November 30th. As long as my anxiety doesn't make me take it off KDP for some stupid reason one day.
Yeah, as far as Goodreads, I sent my book to ARCs, and then the next morning, one was like, "Hey, your book's not on Goodreads," and I was like,
What do you mean? It's only been 24 hours.
"I'm
Why do
like,
you need the link?
I was gonna do pre-orders next weekend, and here you are finishing in 24
I
hours,"
need to do it.
which as an author, that is amazing because that means they could
It
not
is.
put it down and they got it done, and
They
there was
devoured it.
quite a few that have done the same thing. I mean, it's been like this past Monday, is when it went out, and there's already like several have already reviewed it on social media and on Goodreads, and I'm just like,
It's so This
wow.
feels so good. It feels so good. Oh,
Yes. It's like,
yes.
you see the authors that are like, oh, just as long as one person likes it, I'll feel like, justified, I guess, in spending all the time. And I'm like, I'm sorry. I do a lot of other things. I'm going to need more than one person to like this book for me to keep writing.
No, I'm one of those ones. I convinced myself as long as one person liked it, it was worth all the time. I convinced myself that I did. Do I want more people to like it? Oh, absolutely. And they do. Thank God. Because I don't if only one person liked it, I don't know what I would have done.
Yeah. Well, and
I don't know what I would have done.
so far, I had an alpha reader who's my best friend, so I'm like, she's not gonna, she helped me like, oh, these two characters need more scenes in there, but I'm like, I knew she wasn't gonna be like, this is an
A
awful
harsh
book.
critic? A harsh critic? Yeah.
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 So then I almost didn't send it to beta readers because I was scared. And then it took me about 2 weeks to convince myself to do it. And then I had quite a few sign on and they were like, "Oh my god, we're so excited for this book." And all the feedback was really good. They helped me make it so much better. So I'm glad that it did go to betas because they helped make it so much better
Good.
before it went to the editor who would have just, edited what was already there. She wouldn't have given
Right.
feedback
The
on stuff.
developmental. Yep.
Yeah, so like we were talking about your people telling you to add in extra scenes and stuff. One of my beta readers was like, "Hey, you leave a couple of gaps in like the information, like it's just N It's not that it's not there, but it's like the person reacting to it is, like, way too calm about it. And so she had an idea to add in
Sure.
these, like, little text message conversations throughout the book where it's like, you're getting these
Oh,
little drops of information. Now, mine is a fantasy book, but part of it does take place in our world, and so it's text messages. Now for the
oh,
novella, that is all in the fantasy world, which is, like, primitive 1700s. So,
oh, so definitely
no
no texting on
no
that level.
texting, no
Got it.
texting. We had to go with, like, letters and just, like, messengers,
Get it in the Raven's hands.
something. I'm like, "So, this is interesting. Why do I
The
do this to
Raven.
myself?"
I Well, I was the same way because I didn't when I've always written in a fantasy world
Mhm,
all of my writing, and it's the things you don't think about when you are actually writing a full blown book, like traveling. So obviously, my book is based in a fantasy world. There's no technology, but it's kind of left open to the interpretation of like, okay, well, we're in the year 6064, but they don't have cars, they don't have anything, they're riding on horses, there's no electricity, there's magic, what's going on? It's left open to that interpretation, and it does have a at the end of the series, it kind of answers that question. Um, Anyways, how long does it take to ride a horse from point A to point B? But it's different if it's snowing, if it's raining, and I'm like, so wait, okay, so it
how
takes us
far can a
10
horse
days.
travel in a day? That was that
How
was
long do they
me.
sleep? No, how long do they sleep? Literally, I was like, how long does a horse sleep? Because right,
Mine
you
don't get
don't
to
tell the
sleep.
time.
I didn't even think about that.
Well, like in one of the scenes in book one is that they're running away from something, and they go to sleep, and it's kind of like a seeing how she saw the horse awake when she went to sleep, and then the horse was asleep when she woke up. So like putting like a timeline, like, okay, well, horses only sleep for 4 or 5 hours normally. And
Mhm.
so, okay, well, it's only been a couple of hours. So because the sun, yeah. So like just it's the things like that you don't think about until you're writing in a
Yeah.
book and you're just like, some motherfucker is gonna be like, that's not accurate. Horses don't sleep for 8 hours.
So, my book, and this was a beta reader thing, so my book has, like, war kind of battle, we're gonna call it a battle because like, there's gonna be a bigger war later on, but, um, so there's this little battle, skirmish, whatever you wanna call it, people die, okay? So
Whatever.
so
They
I
die.
would turn to my husband and be like, "Could you shoot a bow and arrow if you'd been suspended by your wrists?"
I imagine them using their chin.
And he'd be like, "It'd be incredibly painful, but it could be done." And
Sure. Right.
then I got lucky that some of my beta readers have certain experience in certain categories and helped make it more realistic.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I love that.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. I'm like, "Hey, so now I'll, like, text her and be like, 'Hey, would this be possible?'" And she'd be like, "Well, you'd have to write it like this." I'm like, "Okay."
Oh, I have to plug this in because I was just talking about this in the comment section on a TikTok. Is that I'm 6 foot, my husband's 6'2", and my main female character is 5'5", where the main male is whatever, 6.5 feet. And I'm like, when it got to the spicy scenes, I'm like, will this work? And because my husband and I are so close, the same height. I'm like, well, it works for me, but does does he have to pick her up to make this work, or like what happens? Like I sit here. I think that's why my spice scenes take so long to write. I'm like, is this plausible for her height to his height? And that's why I didn't make them like in the standard like say books where they're like 7 feet. There are some very tall
Yeah.
people, but not in the love interest area. I was like, I'm not making them above 6.5 feet because I don't not know I don't know nobody that's 7 feet tall and how that will work. So we're not gonna
Right.
even tread down that lane. So I feel that.
Yeah,
Feel
mine,
that.
I don't mention specific heights in my book, but, like, when she first meets the male main character, she has to look up, up
Up,
at
up,
him, which
up.
indicates, "Hi," my
Pretty
editor
tall.
was like, "Just take out the other 2 ups," and I'm like, "No, it indicates he's freaking tall."
Oh. I have
Like
to know that my head hurt, my neck hurts when I look up at this
yeah.
person. I
I'm
have to
like,
know.
I don't wanna say, "Oh, he's 6'8." Like, no, I had to look up at
Up.
him.
And I can't put 5 P's in there. Okay, so it has to be up, up, up.
Yes, yes.
My neck hurts.
I did try
Oh,
to use the, like, triple word thing sparingly, but on one of the situations, I did remove it because I was like, "Okay, it doesn't need to be that way." But it is what it is.
oh.
I wanted it
Yeah.
up, 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 and there was another one that she also said to remove that I did not, so I'm like, "It's my book, I'm gonna do what I want."
This
Technically,
podcast should be called
grammatically
Up, Up, Up. Please.
ML liked Princess Mononoke growing up. Today we'll be reading The Story of Princess Hase, a Japanese fairy tale. Don't forget we're reading Les Morts d'Arthur, the story of King Arthur and of his noble knights of the Round Table on our Patreon. You can find the link in the show notes. The Story of Princess Hase, a story of old Japan. Many, many years ago, there lived in Nara, the ancient capital of Japan, a wise state minister by name Prince Toyonari Fujiwara. His wife was a noble, good, and beautiful woman called Princess Murasaki, Violet. They had been married by their respective families according to Japanese custom when very young, and had lived together happily ever since. They had, however, one cause for great sorrow. For as the years went by, no child was born to them. This made them very unhappy, for they both longed to see a child of their own, who would grow up to gladden their old age, carry on the family name, and keep up the ancestral rights when they were dead. The prince and his lovely wife, after long consultation and much thought, determined to make a pilgrimage to the temple of Hase no Kwanan, goddess of mercy at Hase, for they believed, according to the beautiful tradition of their religion, that the Mother of Mercy, Kwanan, comes to answer the prayers of mortals in the form that they need the most. Surely, after all these years of prayer, she would come to them in the form of a beloved child, in answer to their special pilgrimage, for that was the greatest need of their 2 lives. Everything else they had that this life could give them. But it was all as nothing because the cry of their hearts was unsatisfied. So the prince Toyonari and his wife went to the temple of Kannon at Hase and stayed there for a long time, both daily offering incense and prayer to Kannon, the Heavenly Mother, to grant them the desire of their whole lives. And their prayer was answered. A daughter was born at last to the Princess Murasaki, and great was the joy of her heart. On presenting the child to her husband, they both decided to call her Hase Heim, or the Princess of Hase, because she was the gift of the canon at that place. They both reared her with great care and tenderness, and the child grew in strength and beauty. When the little girl was 5 years old, her mother fell dangerously ill, and all the doctors and their medicines could not save her. A little before she breathed her last, she called her daughter to her, and gently stroking her head said, "Hase Heim, do you know that your mother cannot live any longer? No, I die, you must grow up a good girl. Do your best not to give trouble to your nurse or any other of your family. Perhaps your father will marry again, and someone will fill my place as your mother. If so, do not grieve for me, but look upon your father's second wife as your true mother, and be obedient and filial to both her and your father. Remember when you are grown up to be submissive to those who are your superiors, and to be kind to all those who are under you. Don't forget this. I die with the hope that she will grow up a model woman." Hisheim listened in an attitude of respect while her mother spoke, and promised to do all that she was told. There's a proverb which says, "As the soul is at 3, so it is at 100. So Hisheim grew up as her mother had wished, a good and obedient little princess. though she was now too young to understand how great was the loss of her mother. Not long after the death of his first wife, Prince Toyonari married again a lady of noble birth named Princess Chirrut. Very different in character, alas, to the good and wise Princess Murasaki. This woman had a cruel, bad heart. She did not love her stepdaughter at all, and was often very unkind to the little motherless girl, saying to herself, "This is not my child. This is not my child." But Haesheim bore every unkindness with patience, and even waited upon her stepmother kindly and obeyed her in every way, and never gave any trouble, just as she had been trained by her own good mother, so that the Lady Chirrut had no cause for complaint against her. The little princess was very diligent, and her favorite studies were music and poetry. She would spend several hours practicing every day, and her father had the most proficient of masters he could find to teach her the koto, Japanese harp, the art of writing letters and verse. When she was 12 years of age, she could play so beautifully that she and her stepmother were summoned to the palace to perform before the emperor. It was the festival of the cherry flowers, and there were great festivities at the court. The emperor threw himself into the enjoyment of the season and commanded that Princess Hase should perform before him on the koto, and that her mother, Princess Chirrut, should accompany her on the flute. The emperor sat on a raised dais, before which was hung a curtain of finely sliced bamboo and purple tassels, so that His Majesty might see all and not be seen, for no ordinary subject was allowed to look upon his sacred face. Haestheim was a skilled musician, though so young, and often astonished her masters by her wonderful memory and talent. On this momentous occasion, she played well, but Princess Chirrut, her stepmother, who was a lazy woman and never took the trouble to practice daily, broke down in her accompaniment and had to request one of the court ladies to take her place. This was a great disgrace, and she was furiously jealous to think that she had failed where her stepdaughter succeeded. And to make matters worse, the emperor sent many beautiful gifts to the little princess to reward her for playing so well at the palace. There was also now another reason why Princess Chirrut hated her stepdaughter, for she had had the good fortune to have a son born to her, and in her inmost heart she kept saying, "If only Haesheim were not here, my son would have all the love of his father." And never having learned to control herself, she allowed this wicked thought to grow into the awful desire of taking her stepdaughter's life. So one day she secretly ordered some poison and poisoned some sweet wine. This poisoned wine she put into a bottle. Into another similar bottle she poured some good wine. It was the occasion of the boys' festival on the 5th of May, and Haesheim was playing with her little brother. All his toys of warriors and heroes were spread out, and she was telling him wonderful stories about each of them. They were both enjoying themselves and laughing merrily with their attendants when his mother entered with 2 bottles of wine and some delicious cakes. "You are both so good and happy," said the wicked Princess Chirrut with a smile, "that I've brought you some sweet wine as a reward, and here are some nice cakes for my good children." And she filled 2 cups from the different bottles. Haesheim, never dreaming of the dreadful part her stepmother was acting, took one of the cups of wine and gave to her little stepbrother the other that had been poured out for him. The wicked woman had carefully marked the poisoned bottle, but on coming into the room she had grown nervous. Pouring out the wine hurriedly, had unconsciously given the poisoned cup to her own child. All this time she was anxiously watching the little princess, but to her amazement no change whatever took place in the young girl's face. Suddenly the little boy screamed and threw himself on the floor, doubled up with pain. His mother flew to him, taking the precaution to upset the 2 tiny jars of wine, which she had brought into the room, and lifted him up. The attendants rushed for the doctor, but nothing could save the child. He died within the hour in his mother's arms. Doctors did not know much in those ancient times, and it was thought that the wine had disagreed with the boy, causing convulsions of which he died. Thus was the wicked woman punished in losing her own child when she had tried to do away with her stepdaughter. But instead of blaming herself, she began to hate Haesheim more than ever in the bitterness and wretchedness of her own heart, and she eagerly watched for an opportunity to do her harm, which was, however, long in coming. When Haesheim was 13 years of age, she had already become mentioned as a poetess of some merit. This was an accomplishment very much cultivated by the women of old Japan, and one held in high esteem. It was the rainy season at Nara. and floods were reported every day as doing damage in the neighborhood. The river Tatsuda, which flowed through the imperial palace grounds, was swollen to the top of its banks, and the roaring of the torrents of water rushing along a narrow bed so disturbed the emperor's rest day and night that a serious nervous disorder was the result. An imperial edict was sent forth to all the Buddhist temples, commanding the priests to offer up continuous prayers to heaven to stop the noise of the flood. But this was of no avail. Then it was whispered in court circles that the Princess Hase, the daughter of Prince Toyonari Fujiwara, second minister at court, was the most gifted poetess of the day, though still so young, and her masters confirmed the report. Long ago, a beautiful and gifted maiden poetess had moved heaven by praying in verse, had brought down rain upon a land famished with drought. So said the ancient biographers of the poetess Ono no Komachi. If the Princess Hase were to write a poem and offer it in prayer, might it not stop the noise of the rushing river and remove the cause of the imperial illness? What the court said at last reached the ears of the emperor himself, and he sent an order to the minister, Prince Toyonari, to this effect. Great indeed was Haseheim's fear and astonishment when her father sent for her and told her what was required of her. Heavy indeed was the duty that was laid on her young shoulders, that of saving the emperor's life by the merit of her verse. At last the day came, and her poem was finished. It was written on a leaflet of paper heavily flecked with gold dust. With her father and attendants and some of the court officials, she proceeded to the bank of the roaring torrent, and raising up her heart to heaven, she read the poem she had composed aloud, lifting it heavenwards in her two hands. Strange indeed it seemed to all those standing round. The waters ceased their roaring, and the river was quiet in direct answer to her prayer. After this, the emperor soon recovered his health. His Majesty was highly pleased and sent for her to the palace and rewarded her with the rank of Chinyo, that of lieutenant general, to distinguish her. From that time, she was called Chinyo Haim, or the Lieutenant General Princess, and respected and loved by all. There was only one person who was not pleased at Haseheim's success. That one was her stepmother, forever brooding over the death of her own child whom she had killed when trying to poison her stepdaughter. She had the mortification of seeing her rise to power and honor, marked by imperial favor and the admiration of the whole court. Her envy and jealousy burned in her heart like fire. Many were the lies she carried to her husband about Haseheim, but all to no purpose. He would listen to none of her tales, telling her sharply that she was quite mistaken. At last the stepmother, seizing the opportunity of her husband's absence, ordered one of her old servants to take the innocent girl to the Hibari Mountains, the wildest part of the country, and to kill her there. She had invented a dreadful story about the little princess, saying that this was the only way to prevent disgrace falling upon the family. By killing her, Katada, her vessel, was bound to obey his mistress. Anyhow, he saw that it would be the wisest plan to pretend obedience in the absence of the girl's father, so he placed Haseheim in the palanquin and accompanied her to the most solitary place he could find in the wild district. The poor child knew there was no good in protesting to her unkind stepmother at being sent away in this strange manner, so she went as she was told. But the old servant knew that the young princess was quite innocent of all the things her stepmother had invented to him as reasons for her outrageous orders, and he determined to save her life. Unless he killed her, however, he could not return to his cruel taskmistress. So he decided to stay out in the wilderness. With the help of some peasants, he soon built a little cottage, and having sent secretly for his wife to come, these two good old people did all in their power to take care of the now unfortunate princess. She all the time trusted in her father, knowing that as soon as he returned home and found her absent, he would search for her. Prince Toyonari, after some weeks, came home and was told by his wife that his daughter Haim had done something wrong and had run away for fear of being punished. He was nearly ill with anxiety. Everyone in the house told the same story, that Haseheim had suddenly disappeared. None of them knew why or whither. For fear of scandal, he kept the matter quiet and searched everywhere he could think of, but all to no purpose. One day, trying to forget his terrible worry, he called all his men together and told them to make ready for a several days' hunt in the mountains. They were soon ready and mounted, Waiting at the gate for their lord, he rode hard and fast to the district of the Hibari Mountains, a great company following him. He was soon far ahead of everyone and at last found himself in a narrow, picturesque valley. Looking round and admiring the scenery, he noticed a tiny house on one of the hills quite near, and then he distinctly heard a beautiful, clear voice reading aloud. Seized with curiosity as to who could be studying so diligently in such a lonely spot, he dismounted, and leaving his horse to his groom, he walked up the hillside and approached the cottage. As he drew nearer, his surprise increased, for he could see that the reader was a beautiful girl. The cottage was wide open, and she was sitting facing the view. Listening attentively, he heard her reading the Buddhist scriptures with great devotion. More and more curious, he hurried on to the tiny gate and entered the little garden. And looking up, beheld his lost daughter, Hase. She was so intent on what she was saying that she neither heard nor saw her father till he spoke. "Hase," he cried. "It is you, my Hase." Taken by surprise, she could hardly realize that it was her own dear father who was calling her, and for a moment she was utterly bereft of the power to speak or move. My father, it is indeed you! Oh, my father," was all she could say, and running to him, she caught hold of his thick sleeve, and burying her face, burst into a passion of tears. Her father stroked her dark hair, asking her gently to tell him all that had happened. But she only wept on, and he wondered if he were not really dreaming. Then the faithful old servant Katata came out, and bowing himself to the ground before his master, poured out the long tale of wrong, telling him all that had happened. And how it was that he found his daughter in such a wild and desolate spot, with only 2 servants to take care of her. The prince's astonishment and indignation knew no bounds. He gave up the hunt at once and hurried home with his daughter. One of the company galloped ahead to inform the household of the glad news, and the stepmother, hearing what had happened and fearful of meeting her husband now that her wickedness was discovered, fled from the house and returned in disgrace to her father's roof, and nothing more was heard of her. The old servant Katata was rewarded with the highest promotion in his master's service, and lived happily to the end of his days, devoted to the little princess who never forgot that she owed her life to this faithful retainer. She was no longer troubled by an unkind stepmother, and her days passed happily and quietly with her father. As Prince Toyonari had no son, he adopted a younger son of one of the court nobles to be his heir, and to marry his daughter Hase, and in a few years the marriage took place. Hase lived to a good old age, and all said that she was the wisest, most devout, and most beautiful mistress that had ever reigned in Prince Toyonari's ancient house. She had the joy of presenting her son, the future lord of the family, to her father just before he retired from active life. To this day, there is a preserved piece of needlework in one of the Buddhist temples of Kyoto. It is a beautiful piece of tapestry, with the figure of Buddha embroidered in the silky threads drawn from the stem of the lotus. This is said to have been the work of the hands of the good Princess Hase. Thank you for joining Freya's Fairy Tales. Be sure to come back next week for the conclusion of Immel's journey to holding her own fairy tale in her hands, and to hear another of her favorite fairy tales.